The next thing that we can start to do in our model is add in our grid lines. Creating grid lines is another way to create a view inside of SDS2. These views can be opened and used to model members as well as be detailed to get elevation views of the model. So to start, what we'll want to do is go to our layout page, and in our views grid section we have a add grid line command, or you can type GS on your keyboard. So I'm going to go ahead and run the add grid line command. And once we hit that command, it wants us to locate two separate points. As you can see, our locate tab will open up that shows our snaps and modifiers. And by default, our intersection of construction line is checked on for snaps. So the order in which we pick the points for our grid lines will affect how our views will come out. The points picked for all the views will also be the extents of which that can be opened or that can be viewed when you open that view. So you need to be careful when creating these grid lines, as these will be the extents. So if you would have a member outside of these grid lines, they wouldn't be shown in that view. And once the points are picked, we will be asked to name the view of the grid that we just drew. So to get started, I will look at creating grid line number 3. And for the sake of this project, I will be drawing mine in from left to right. And to demonstrate this, I will just go ahead and pick my first point over here, and I will move my mouse to the right. As you can see, there's an arrow that gets populated when picking my second point, and right now that arrow is pointing up. So that's going to be the direction of the view that gets created. So we're going to be looking up or to the north. To demonstrate that, again, I'm going to, for example, if I would pick my right point first and go left, you can see that the arrow is now pointing down. So that's the direction that view would be looking. It'd be looking to the south. In this case, we don't want to do that. So I'm going to pick my grid line command, and I'm going to pick my first point here. I'm going to come all the way over here to my last construction line, and I'm going to pick that point there. And we get the new erection view window to open up. So the first thing we can do here is we can give our view a name. So this one will be view 3. Below that, we have a checkbox to auto pin to this view. Auto pin to this view will allow members to auto pin to the view if you do not have your member pins disabled by default. And again, we won't really get into that, so I'm just going to leave mine unchecked for now. Below that, we have an option to choose if we want a finite grid line or an infinite grid line. Finite grid lines will only go to the points that you picked, and if this option is unchecked when adding the views, you will get the grid line names extended to the edge of your modeling area. Below that is our grid bubble setback. So our grid bubble setback is used for finite grid lines to set how far the grid bubbles are held back from the points that you picked. So this will be a value that is a distance value. Our relative view depth, the top and bottom, will affect at what elevations or plan views that this grid line will be visible. So any view above or below an elevation of these values will not see the view. So if we take a look here quick on our sheet S5, we can see that our roof elevation goes up to 8,371. So to give myself a little bit more room just to make sure we can see these views, I'm just going to go 8,500. And then our bottom elevation, our lowest is 0, so 0 should be okay for what we need. Next, we have our erection view type. The erection view type will affect how the grids are detailed in your plan views. So if I take a look at the image here, we can see that primary is going to be our topmost grid line. Secondary is then going to be dropped below that, or have the option to be dropped below the primary, and then add the dimensions between the primaries and the secondaries. Dimension-only erection views are going to place a dimension in there, but not get any of the grid markers. And then placement only will not be shown on the erection view drawings at all. In this case, gridline 3 is going to be a primary, so we will leave that primary checked on. Below that is our depth check. The depth check will set the default depth check that will be applied when this view is opened. So again, we have our depth check in our model to see 1,000 in and 1,000 out. That is okay for our erection views, so we will leave that set to be the same. Below that we have our drawing grid line pen color. So again, that'll be the color of the grid line that will show up on the drawing. We have our modeling grid line pen color. We can either have that set to use drawing pen, to use our site options, or we could use custom and we can pick our color there. We will just use our site option, so we'll leave that checked on. Below that we can choose what our grid line type is going to be. If we want to make this my default view, and then the for detailing checkbox as well. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and check on for detailing, and I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And now we can see our grid line number 3 get placed inside of our model. So the next thing we can do inside of our model is look at adding in our grid line 2.1. So what we could do is we could come in here and we could draw the same 2 points that we did for grid line number 3, and we could go through those options again, and we could enter that grid line in there like we did for number 3, or we could come up here and we could use our base grid line. And what this is going to do is this is going to operate similarly to how the base grid line. This is going to operate and function similarly like how the construction base grid line worked. So if I click on this, now what I can do is I can specify which grid line I want to base that from, and then we can enter in a dimension from grid line. So what I did is I just picked the grid line number 3, and if we refer to our sheets, we can see that the distance from grid line 3 and grid line 2.1 is going to be 6,096. So I can come in here and I can just specify that distance. So I'm going to type in 6096. And then what we can do is we can give that view a name. So this will be grid line 2.1. We'll leave auto pin to this view unchecked. We can leave finite checked on. And then as we can see going down through these settings here, they will stay the same. So our grid bubble setback is the same. Our relative view depth has stayed the same, so we don't need to change that. This will be our primary erection view type. The depth check is good. Our drawing and modeling grid line pen colors are good as well. The only thing I will have to do is come down here and I'm going to check on for detailing. And now I'm just going to click add. And as you can see, grid line 2.1 is now placed on that construction line where we need that to be. So what we can do now is repeat this process for our grid lines 2, 1.9, and grid line number 1. So our distance changed between grid line 2.1 and 2. So I'll have to come up here and I'll have to specify that distance. So that'll be 2286. Our view name is going to be grid line 2. And all of our settings stayed the same. So I will check on for detailing again. And I will click add. And then I will repeat this process for 1.9 and 1. So that distance is the same. All I need to do here is change this to 1.9. Check for detailing. Click add. And then we have another distance change from 1.9 to 1. It's going back to our 6096. So I will type that in there. And this view name is going to be Gridline 1. And again, I will check on for detailing and click add. And now we have all of our horizontal grid lines into our model. The next thing we'll do is we'll look at creating our vertical grid lines. So what I'll do here is I'll just cancel out of this add erection view. And I will again go ahead and enter into my add grid line command. As you can see, since that is the most recently used command, it is populated over here on our left side toolbar, so we could come over here and just click this icon again, and we'll be entered into this command. The one thing that I'll need to do here is change our snaps from base grid line to our intersection construction line, so I'll go ahead and change that. And for our vertical lines, I'm going to choose from bottom to top, so that we are looking left or to the west. So I'll go ahead and pick those 2 points. And then we can go ahead and name this view A. And then we're going to have to go through and change our relative view depth again. So for our top, we set, for our horizontal ones, we set 8500. So I will go ahead and change that. These will be our primary erection view types. Our depth check looks good. Our grid line pen colors look good. I will go ahead and check on for detailing and say OK. And again, like we added in our horizontal grid lines, we can go ahead and use our base grid line snap and add in our vertical ones. So for this, we want to make sure that we have our vertical grid line selected. So I'm going to come down here, I'm going to select A. And our distance away from A to B is 7,620. So I will go ahead and type that distance in here. And our view name is going to be B. All of this information gets remembered. I'm going to check on for detailing and I will click add. We can see that our distance from B to C and from C to D is the same. So all we'll have to do here is come up and change the view name, check on for detailing, and add in again. And we'll repeat that for grid line D. Click add. And then from D to E, our distance changed again, and that will be 6,096. So I will make that change, rename our view to E, check on for detailing, and add in. And now we have all of our vertical and horizontal grid lines inside of our model.